Music. We so often think that our only partners in life are those that we actually live with or are in intimate relationships with, perhaps business partners, but there's so many varieties of partnerships. In our story for all ages, God partners with a man and a woman because working on the world is just too much to do alone. Humans have been in partnership from the beginning of life. It's our nature. Cultivating partnerships is crucial in our everyday lives. I remember a story once when I was a clinical social worker here in Charlottesville prior to entering the ministry. I worked with a colleague then to create a support group out in the community. And our supervisor had us partner with an art therapist, a music therapist, and a movement therapist. So many types of therapists. But we learned so much from that. Together, we began to understand more about one another. And in the process, we learned how to co-create an environment where support and healing could take place. It was both a personal challenge as well as a delight. In talking about this service, Fritz and I learned to partner with one another. We heard each other's preferences and strong feelings about each element, and we chose together, particularly, we looked for hours for just the right story, or what we thought was the right story, until we agreed on partners. The congregation here has often been a crucible for developing partnerships, a nurturing place for many of its members who unveil their gifts for either professional ordained ministry or for service to the greater good. My earliest leadership roles in this congregation 20-some odd years ago led me to become a Unitarian Universalist minister. This congregation fostered my learning about pastoral care, which augmented my social work training as a therapist and a community organizer. I became the convener of what was then called Pastoral Associates. I also served as a convener of Worship Associates, which what you now call Worship Weavers. I learned about social action and justice in this congregation in a religious context as co-chair of the Social Action Committee. And then I realized our connections to the wider world through the Unitarian Universalist Association's anti-racism initiative, which was a national initiative, as well as the district anti-racism transformational team. At that time, our former minister, Reverend Wayne Arneson, and I partnered on a skit at the anti-racism conference held right here in these pews. And it was from this pulpit that I preached my very first sermon. And I remember it being titled Unwrapping Our Gifts. And it was about how both ordained ministers and lay leaders work together, either in the pews or on the Zoom views, to share in the ministry of the whole congregation. Good ministers, like our very own Reverends Tim and Leah, they seek ways to share, to develop that kind of ministry in others. not just in themselves. And this church has always sponsored a number of its members, now ordained, like me and Pam Phillips, and Adam Slate, now on the path to Unitarian Universalist ministry. Yes. I'm so grateful to this congregation and to its leadership who helped me to realize and develop my own ministerial calling. As Fritz and I talked about our various callings within congregations and in the community at large, we both thought of one of the forebears of Unitarianism, James Luther Adams. Adams spoke of Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation concept of the priesthood of all believers, but he added on the prophethood of all believers. Adams believed that both were necessary for religious communities and community organizations that wished to transform injustice and the world, what Judaism calls tikkun olam. And I think we do that by becoming better and better partners with one another. In our liberal faith, the priestly role offers blessing as folks go through various rites of passage like birth, coming of age, marriage, and death. A congregation partners with its ministers who have the gifts, the training, and a shared vision to accompany people and lead through these passages. The prophetic role is one that has always claimed my heart. Often members side with love, like the stole that I have here. It's our public witness advocacy program as part of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Side with love is about bringing more justice and greater compassion. Ministers and lay members act in numerous ways with interfaith partners or with other social justice organizations. It's a part of that swirling glob that we had here. In that work, we are partners in solidarity, and we're accountable to those on the front lines of injustice and oppression. And we may decide on justice priorities and enact them as we do with inner impact, or meet the moment as in the August 12th, 2017 counter-protest that stood up to hate, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy. Like many people, I answered the call from this congregation. Called me back, and I drove from Savannah, Georgia, where I was serving, to join other Unitarian Universalist clergy and UCC members in action in our partnership together. And now Fritz has his own reflections on the priestly role, on priest in the pews and on the views.
So, first, how should I address you? Ladies and gentlemen over here? Well, we know that's not near inclusive enough, don't we? How about non-binary siblings over here? I don't know a lot about angels, but I definitely want to give you the full respect of whatever may be your gendered identity. What I want to ask you all, though, is in all of your humanity and all of your divinity, to consider Reverend Susan here as our Exhibit A. I'll call her our multiplied minister. I happen to know Susan's place among us on most Sundays now. It's about 3/4 of the way back, just behind you, John. I think it's the next one back. But I asked her, so what was it when you were here as a member? And he said, oh, no, I was never on that side. She was over on this side, and maybe right over there next to Donna or something about there, she said. And I said, wow, that's putting some people back there on a pretty hot seat, doesn't it, to know that out of that came this? She's our multiplied minister, to be sure. As a matter of fact, my first seat among us when I began worshiping here 3 years ago was among all of you in Zoom land, for it was in my home desk chair. But I had moved that chair there from my minister's office at the Unitarian Church in Lincoln, Nebraska. I had been minister emeritus there since retiring from its full service 9 years ago. So those of you in Zoom land, you're not in any safer seats. It's hot there as well. And if Susan's model for coming into our partnered ministry somehow doesn't feel like yours, I now offer myself as Exhibit B. I'm going to call myself our mugwump minister. Mugwump. That's an old term, I know that. It kind of means fence sitter, right? Someone politically trying to take both sides of a defensive issue. They're mug on one side and they're wump on the other side of that fence. Susan is no mugwump on minister, I have to tell you. You just heard how from her early days here in church membership into and through her years of full service as a titled minister in other congregations, and now among us as an ordained member, she's been continuously growing in that ministry. She's been adding new layers, new dimensions, new arenas in her impassioned service of our values, of our people, and indeed of our entire world. And when she asks you to become her partner, you can't try saying, oh, we're too little. She's multiplied herself in the ministry from right where you're sitting. But if you say, but look how big she is, I guess I'm here to say, look how big I'm not. I need you as a partner in ministry, if only in my particular way. I say I am a mugwump on ministry, and I always have been, really. In my childhood family, faith was a very private matter, and church was a world apart. In fact, it was in the next town over, and it felt very separate from where we carried on our real life. My path to engagement with that real life, I thought, would go through some training in the law and perhaps into a position in government. But there were others in my life who saw possibilities that I couldn't. They asked me, well, gee, what do you think about an all-expense trial year in seminary? How about looking into the church's real relationship to community? For free, I said. Well, I guess I've got a year for that. And so I climbed that fence just to take a peek. And once I was on, I began to see down below me how the anchoring posts that held it up actually framed below the surface a kind of hidden bridge into community at its deepest level. Here's how I have crossed that bridge in the years since. That 1-year trial in seminary lured me to self-fund the remaining 2 years of ministry training, but only after I had taken 2 years away in secular service in the Peace Corps in North Africa. For a first church, I sought a very unique situation. I wanted a half-time calling in a member-led congregation that was just taking on its first professional minister. I wanted to work with people to expand their ministry, not do it for them. And I wanted freedom to find service among people who I knew would never enter our doors. And I found that in Wilmington, North Carolina, as minister of its UU fellowship, as it was called, and as a community organizer, a neighborhood organizer, employed by the city of Wilmington. And is it any wonder that that very same congregation lured Susan into full-time ministry 25 years after I left it? And then I went back to pick up that path that I first imagined for myself, moving up to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I got that lawyer training, but I also took my first shot at being an ordained church member in the local Unitarian congregation. I sang in that choir, and I taught in that Sunday school. And then for 35 years, you could say, I kind of took on a disguise. To most eyes, I appeared to be a full-service church minister in 6 communities across the country. But at the same time, I was admitted to the bar in 3 states, and I served as a farm credit mediator in one, and as an immigration attorney in another. And then 6 years ago, I removed that costume, you might say this costume, and I became a full staff attorney in the juvenile court in Lincoln. And then with love and with family brought me here. My service became special advocacy and mediation in our domestic relations court and a restorative justice facilitator through our Commonwealth Attorney's offices. So I'm here to offer you my model for ministry, quite next to Susan's. You can engage as a partner with us, and no one needs to know it. You can wear your disguise as a lawyer, as a nurse, as a plumber, as a restaurateur, and in that very work, only you will know that what drives you, what guides you, what really rewards you in that, quote, secular work is that it's grounded in your service to the values of membership in our faith. That's my ministry now. My mug is more often in court than this is my first time and maybe my last in the pulpit. But my wump, some Sundays is in the choir, some Sundays is over in Summit House with our youth, but most Sundays, right next to you in a pew.
The Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association Code of Ethics outlines how colleagues are to be in right partnership with one another and all the congregations they serve. And Reverends Tim and Leah often send to me kind of requests from people who are non-members who wish to be married and officiant to be a Unitarian Universalist minister for their weddings or for memorial services. And so they've sent me quite a few people, and I've enjoyed that process of getting to know them. I feel that this is a way I can serve the larger community as a Unitarian Universalist minister affirmed by this congregation's ministers in that kind of a priestly role. And yet, on the other hand, as a member, as a volunteer in the pews with you, I played a part in adult and youth faith development and participate in Impact and with the Charlottesville Clergy Collective in the prophet kind of role, social justice work. The differences between me or Fritz and Reverends Tim and Leah, we're all clear about the boundaries, and we have many dialogues about how we work together, how we partner together. So that kind of partnership extends to them and to us. But the question is, how do you discern what kind of partnership you wish to engage in whatever facet of your life, because it extends well beyond this congregation into your whole lives. How do you decide in what kind of capacity you want to serve the world and heal it which is so much needed for us. You may be, or you may have been, enacting different kind of roles in your life: a teacher, a computer expert, a carpenter, a plumber, a caregiver, all kinds of things. These roles may or may not be ones that you want to bring to the church or to the community that you're a part of. But either way, the roles you play usually will bring some spiritual growth for you, and for that particular place that you're serving. They may bring you a sense of delight as the theme for this month. Delight that washed over me recently as I talked to this wedding couple, and they told me, this is what I love so much, getting to know people, getting to know what's at their heart and their soul, telling me about their past life, how they met, what reinforced their love for one another, why they chose each other out of all the people in the world, their religious past or lack of. And so I have a simple wish, a prayer really for each of you. And it's that you realize the pathways that call you to partner. And may those paths serve as a larger part of the purpose of your life and demonstrate over and over again how connected we all are in this web of life and love. May it be so.
Martin Luther did proclaim the priesthood of all believers, but he didn't do so that we would all become leaders of holy rites. Rather, he ordained us each to direct communion with God. In translating the Greek scriptures into vernacular German, Luther empowered his people to read and believe what the Apostle Peter wrote to the Gentile Christians in Asia Minor those many years ago. You are royal priests, and you can show others the goodness of God. In the seedbed of our faith, Ralph Waldo Emerson reclaimed Luther's good news for us. In his Divinity School address in 1838, Emerson charged all ministers then, dare to love God without mediator or veil, acquaint all at first hand with deity. So men or women or non-binary here among us, we all shook hands with God herself just a moment ago. And angels, you were divinely invited to cross this aisle to engage God's partners over here with your questions about how our world is progressing. All that remains to do is what we do every morning at this point in the service. All that remains to do is for us to rise as we are able, to rise and to cross whatever aisles, to overstep whatever fences lie between us, to ask and to answer with one another whatever questions engage or divide us, and then to join hands together. We are working on a very big thing here, and none of us, not even any half of us, can do it without all the rest of us. And because we are partners, we can never give up. It is the only way we can ensure that our world is never finished.